Picture this. You're in a relationship where someone takes care of everything for you. They handle the finances, make the big decisions, always know what's best for you. On the surface, it looks like love, but something feels off. You can't quite put your finger on it, but you feel smaller, more dependent, less like yourself. Maybe you've experienced this, or maybe you've witnessed it in someone you care about. That nagging feeling that something isn't quite right, even when everything looks perfect from the outside. Welcome back to the Narcissistic Abuse Recovery Podcast. I'm Lynn, your host. Right around episode 85, our podcast was renamed to the Narcissistic Abuse Recovery Podcast, formerly Moving Forward with Hope, Narcissistic Abuse Recovery Podcast. Please be sure you are subscribed to our podcast. Today, we are going to talk about something that may completely shift how you see certain relationships in your life. We're diving deep into the hidden mechanics of how care, genuine, loving care, can sometimes get twisted into patterns of control. And here's what's important to understand up front. This isn't about judging relationship arrangements or traditional roles. Many couples thrive in partnerships where one person handles finances, another manages the home, or where roles are divided in ways that work for both people. The issue isn't who does what, it's how these arrangements are established and maintained. What we're focusing on today are control patterns that can show up in any relationship dynamic, regardless of gender roles or who's in charge of what. These patterns can emerge gradually, often without anyone realizing it's happening. Our goal isn't to attack anyone or any relationship style. It's to help you recognize when care crosses the line into control, so you can make informed choices about your relationships and ensure your partnerships are built on mutual respect rather than dependence. By the end of this episode, you'll understand how these patterns show up, why they can feel so normal, and most importantly, how to recognize the difference between supportive partnership and emotional control. Before we dive into this topic, we have some housekeeping and podcast updates to share. We've updated and still are updating our podcast episode titles, descriptions, and links. Many titles now include episode numbers. We are adding in subtitles and updating descriptions on our older episodes. If you've saved or shared direct links, please double check they still work. Our podcast is hosted on Acast, which distributes to all major platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Pandora, iHeartRadio. Last we checked, we are on 29 different podcast platforms. You can always subscribe on Acast to be sure you have the most up-to-date link and up-to-date episodes and receive them as soon as we publish them. Some exciting things are unfolding behind the scenes. Stay tuned for additional updates coming soon. So, what are these patterns? Let's start with what we're actually talking about here. When we say control patterns in caring relationships, we're not talking about relationship roles or arrangements. We're talking about behaviors and dynamics that can happen in any type of partnership. These patterns can develop in relationships where one person is the primary breadwinner, the stay-at-home parent, the financial manager, or the decision maker. The arrangement itself isn't the problem. It's when that arrangement becomes a tool for control rather than a mutual choice. Here's what's crucial to understand. Healthy relationship arrangements, whether traditional or non-traditional, are built on mutual agreement, respect, and the ability to renegotiate. Both people maintain their voice, their autonomy, and their individual identity within whatever roles they've chosen. Control patterns, on the other hand, emerge when one person uses their position, whether as provider, caretaker, or decision maker, to diminish the other person's agency, voice, or independence. The key difference between supportive partnership and control patterns is choice, communication, and respect. Supportive partnership asks, what works for both of us? Control patterns operate from, I know what's best for you. Think about it this way. In healthy arrangements, both people feel empowered within their roles. In control patterns, one person feels diminished, regardless of what the roles look like from the outside. Important clarification. Many couples choose arrangements where one person handles all the finances, makes certain decisions, or takes the lead in specific areas. These arrangements can be incredibly healthy and fulfilling when they're based on mutual agreement, when both people's voices are heard, and when the arrangement serves both people's goals and values. Now let's dive into how control patterns actually work in relationships. The caring controller dynamic is one of the most confusing patterns because it often starts with genuine care and good intentions. It might begin beautifully. Someone offers to handle your finances because they're good with money. They make decisions to protect you from stress. They take care of problems before you even know they exist. Initially, this can feel wonderful and supportive, but over time, you might notice subtle shifts. What started as helpful support becomes expectation. Your input becomes less important. Your preferences become secondary to their expertise. This podcast exists to discuss the systems that diminish, control, and silence. We focus on what has been overlooked, question what has been normalized, and create space for healing, clarity, and collective strength. We serve as a resource of hope, encouragement, and validation so victims of narcissistic abuse can rebuild their lives and pursue dreams, visions, and intentional living. So, does this mean that anyone who handled the finances is controlling? This doesn't mean everyone who handles finances is controlling, but watch for these patterns. I handle all the money, so I should have the final say on everything. You don't need to worry about this. I've got it handled. You wouldn't understand the complexities. When financial management becomes a reason to exclude you from decisions about your own life, that's control. Again, it's normal for partners to have different strengths and for one person to take the lead in certain areas. But control patterns emerge when the person in charge begins to position themselves as the ultimate authority on what's best for you. Your instincts, preferences, and desires become secondary to their wisdom. Here's what makes this so confusing. The person doing this often genuinely believes they're helping. They may have learned this pattern from their own family or culture. They may truly think they're being loving and protective, but impact matters more than intent. The guilt factor is crucial here. In healthy arrangements, you feel grateful and empowered. In control patterns, you feel grateful, but also somehow guilty for wanting any independence. They do so much for me. How can I complain? They're just trying to help. I should be more appreciative. This guilt often keeps unhealthy patterns in place. The confusion between being supported and being controlled is real, and it's important to recognize. When someone meets your needs but controls how those needs are met, when they solve your problems but don't want you solving them yourself, when they care for you but get upset when you try to care for yourself, that's when support has crossed into control. Now, a little bit about the system. The system that operates behind the scenes, that seems to keep everything going seamlessly, though invisibly, but a couple of things I want to point out about that system. The patriarchy is not about individual men being inherently evil or women being helpless. It is a social system intentionally created and enforced by men over generations to secure and protect their dominance. From childhood, men were conditioned to believe this hierarchy was natural and right, just as women were conditioned to comply, self-silence, and even police themselves and one another. This mutual conditioning made patriarchy feel normal, leaving it unchallenged for centuries. It was not until women began speaking out and demanding equality that many men were even forced to see patriarchy for what it is. And even then, many chose to defend it because questioning it meant risking the comfort of unearned power. Recognizing that men are both products and active carriers of patriarchy does not absolve them of responsibility. Instead, it highlights the urgent need for both men and women to unlearn these harmful scripts together and to build relationships and communities grounded in mutual respect and equality. You might be wondering, how does control turn into narcissistic abuse? The cycle often looks like this. Overwhelming care and attention, followed by expectations of gratitude and compliance, followed by control over choices and decisions. And when you resist, the care gets withdrawn as punishment. Here's a concrete example. Sarah's partner Jake insists on handling all the household decisions because he wants to make her life easier. He chooses their apartment, manages all the bills, picks their weekend activities, and even orders for her at restaurants because he knows what she likes. Initially, Sarah feels cared for and special, but when she mentions wanting to visit her sister for the weekend, Jake becomes hurt. I planned this nice weekend for us and you'd rather be with your family after everything I do to make your life stress-free. He starts questioning her other relationships. Your coworker seems like a bad influence. Your sister always makes you upset when you visit. When Sarah finally says she wants to make some decisions herself, Jake becomes cold and withdrawn. He stops planning their activities, stops handling the bills, and gives her the silent treatment. The message is clear: accept his care on his terms, or lose it entirely and handle everything yourself. Here's the crucial connection. This relational control can escalate into narcissistic abuse because it creates the foundation for systematic psychological manipulation. Research shows that narcissistic abuse often begins with coercive control, a pattern of behavior used to isolate and influence how someone behaves. What makes this progression so insidious is that it builds on already established patterns of control that initially felt like care. The victim has already been conditioned to accept having their autonomy diminished in exchange for care, making them more vulnerable to escalating manipulation and abuse. The escalation happens through shared mechanisms, power and control frameworks, behavioral patterns that involve exploitation and manipulation, and psychological impacts that create dependency and isolation. As one study explains, narcissistic abuse operates in subtle, manipulative ways that leave victims feeling confused, isolated, and powerless. The progression isn't inevitable. Many controlling relationships don't escalate to narcissistic abuse, but understanding this connection helps explain why victims often don't recognize abuse early. It builds on patterns that were already normalized. Why do these patterns feel so familiar and normal? Because many of us grew up seeing variations of them. When we're raised in environments where love is conditional on compliance, where care comes with strings attached, or where one person's needs consistently override everyone else's, these patterns can feel like normal relationship dynamics. The vulnerability factor is crucial. We all want to be cared for. We all want someone to love us enough to help us. But when we're not taught the difference between supportive care and controlling care, when we're taught that being taken care of is the ultimate goal rather than building mutual partnership, we can become vulnerable to these patterns. The cycle becomes self-reinforcing. The more someone handles your responsibilities, the less confident you may feel about handling them yourself. The more you may depend on their care, the more control they have over your life. And this dependency creates the perfect conditions for potential escalation into more severe forms of psychological abuse. But here's what's important to remember. Recognizing these patterns isn't about blame. It's about awareness. Many people fall into these dynamics without malicious intent. The goal is to recognize them so we can choose something healthier. So what is the psychology behind the control patterns? So how do you know if you're experiencing control patterns in your relationship? Here are some questions for reflection. And remember, these are for your own awareness, not for judging anyone else. Do you feel like you need permission to make decisions about your own life, even small ones? When you express a different opinion, does your partner become hurt, angry, or remind you of everything they do for you? Are you encouraged to have your own thoughts and preferences, or do you feel pressure to agree with theirs? Do you feel like you're growing and becoming more yourself in this relationship, or do you feel like you're shrinking? Are you walking on eggshells, trying not to seem ungrateful? Do you feel supported in pursuing your own interests and friendships, or is there subtle pressure to focus primarily on the relationship? Since episode 69, where we explored the Great Divorce and the widening gap between men and women in relationships, we've been digging deeper, unpacking social conditioning, calling out collective blind spots, and confronting the ways patriarchy shows up in our everyday lives. That episode marked a shift for this podcast. From there, we've been unraveling patriarchy from every angle, and yes, sometimes sideways too. We've also been connecting these patterns to narcissism and emotional abuse in ways that aren't often talked about. And also, episode 88. Listen to this episode as well. We unpack what would happen if men respected women, and we take a look at it from various sources. First, we break down this concept of respect toward women, which is worth your time and energy to hear this perspective. But then we take it further and paint the picture to what it would look like if men respected women in relationships, in the workplace, in partnerships, or marriage. And then we talk about what it would like between the sheets. When we talk about narcissistic abuse, and then we unfold the patriarchy, there is really no stone unturned. The patriarchy affects us all in every area of life, as you can see from this episode. If you are curious and want to learn more, dive into this episode today and absorb the info. If you haven't heard that one yet, make a note to listen after this episode. It lays a foundational path for everything we've uncovered since. It sets the tone for everything we've been unpacking and bringing to light since. And then also, head on over to episode 86 and 87, where we break down the pick-me culture. Some of you may know this or may not, but I grew up in this pick-me culture, deeply embedded in the evangelical church. And we discuss how the pick-me culture is toxic toward women and so much more. Listen to those today. And of course, if you are benefiting from the material, our content, head to our tip jar, link in the description, and toss a positive review our way. It greatly helps our podcast, and we appreciate it. Thank you to so many who have left us a positive review. And here are a few more questions. When you try to handle something yourself, are you supported and encouraged, or are you told you're doing it wrong? Is your growing independence celebrated, or does it seem to threaten your partner? Do you feel like your autonomy is respected, or is it seen as a problem to be solved? Have you heard about the gratitude test? This is a big one. Healthy relationships involve mutual gratitude. You're grateful for what they do, and they're grateful for what you do. But when gratitude becomes one-sided, when you're constantly in debt to them, when their care becomes something you owe them for, that's when gratitude has become a cage. Trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is. Your intuition picks up on power dynamics that your logical mind might be rationalizing away. And a quick recap on the red flags in caring behavior. Making unilateral decisions about your life for your own good. Using their care as leverage in arguments. Becoming upset when you try to be independent. Treating your autonomy as a threat to the relationship, and you might feel they could or would sabotage your efforts, but never admit to doing such. Isolating you from other sources of support while positioning themselves as your primary or only source of care. It can be shocking to believe that people can act and think like this. Remember, the difference between support and control is that support builds your capacity while control diminishes it. Support celebrates your growth. Control requires your smallness. So what does healthy interdependence actually look like? It's mutual, it's empowering, and it builds both people up rather than creating a power imbalance. In healthy partnerships, care flows both ways, maybe not equally at all times, but reciprocally over time. Both people maintain their individual identity and autonomy within whatever roles they've chosen. Arrangements are mutually agreed upon and can be renegotiated as needed. Both people have a voice in decisions that affect them. Independence is celebrated, not threatened. There is not one person who's in charge of everything you do or say, or tries to control how and what you think. You have freedom, autonomy to make, and are held accountable for your own decisions. If one person handles all the finances, the other person still has access to information, input on major decisions, and the ability to change the arrangement if needed. If one person makes most of the day-to-day decisions, it's because both people prefer it that way, not because one person has claimed authority over the other. Setting boundaries without guilt. This means being able to say, I appreciate your concern, but I'm going to handle this myself, without having to justify or defend your choice. It means being able to disagree without punishment. It means being able to grow and change without your partner seeing it as a threat. Communicating needs versus accepting imposed solutions. Instead of someone deciding what you need and providing it, healthy relationships involve ongoing communication about what each person actually needs, wants, and prefers. It's collaborative problem solving rather than one person being the perpetual problem solver. It's a place with mutual respect, freedom with ebb and flow in the relationship. When you're giving care, ask yourself, is this empowering them or creating dependence? Am I doing this because they asked for help or because I think I know better? Will this increase their capacity or decrease it? When you're receiving care, ask yourself, is this building me up or making me smaller? Do I feel grateful and empowered or just grateful? Am I being supported in my goals or am I being guided toward what someone else thinks is best for me? The goal is mutual empowerment. Both people should feel stronger, more capable, and more themselves because of the relationship, not less so. If your insides are smiling because you know and feel you are being treated well, you are in the right position and your intuition is right on. If you feel you need to shrink or decrease or be less than, and you do not have the freedom to do so, and you feel constricted, you may be operating with a controlling person. It can be suffocating. Let's recap what we've covered today. Control patterns in caring relationships can happen in any dynamic, regardless of roles or arrangements. The issue isn't who does what, but how those arrangements are established and maintained. The key signs to watch for: feeling smaller rather than stronger in the relationship, needing permission for your own decisions, having your autonomy treated as a threat, and feeling grateful but somehow diminished. Most importantly, authentic care empowers. It doesn't diminish. It builds capacity. It doesn't create dependence. It celebrates your growth. It doesn't require your smallness. This isn't about judging traditional arrangements or any particular relationship style. Many couples thrive in partnerships where roles are clearly defined and different. The question isn't what your arrangement looks like, but whether it's built on mutual respect, choice, and empowerment. If you found this episode helpful, I'd love to hear from you. What patterns did you recognize? What questions do you still have? And if you're currently in a situation that doesn't feel right, trust that feeling. Your intuition is valid, your autonomy matters, and you deserve relationships that build you up rather than tear you down. We have additional resources on our website at movingforwardafterabuse.com and visit our Gumroad store at waketheelephant.gumroad.com for downloadable episodes and more. These links are in the description. Visit our website at movingforwardafterabuse.com for additional resources. And of course, we are on Substack and Medium as well. We covered a lot of ground in this episode. Thank you for being here. This is Lynn, and this has been another episode of the Narcissistic Abuse Recovery Podcast. Thank you for listening. Drop us a positive review if you are enjoying our show. I'll catch you in the next one. This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. The content shared is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis, please seek help from a qualified professional or contact a local crisis hotline.